This was devastating news that it was found. I've been spending, I've just been crying a lot. You know, it's ironic because when I thought I might be getting close, all I could think about was how awful it was going to be for those who didn't find it, right? And now that's me. So I've been, you know, imbibing to get me through this. Basically, I figured I needed to figure out how to move on. So I thought I'd give my work a funeral, give the official Thrill of the Chase book and everything a proper funeral. When I had gotten the news, I kind of broke down and put everything away because I was in the middle of working on it. For the first time, I had a chance to really dive in, right? With no restrictions on time. And then it was found. So yeah, that hurt. That hurt a lot. And I'm sure you guys are just in the same boat as I am. I've seen YouTubers out there crying. I've seen YouTubers out there, you know, just figuring out what their next move was. But one thing I have to say I was so impressed with, because it's been, I think, 4 days now, something like that, is all the YouTubers, they kept broadcasting, and we so needed that because that was kind of our normal. It had become our normal. We would watch, you know, the YouTube community, and it, you know, it was something. It gave us something that we didn't have, because as much of a community as there was, you know, all the work we do in secrecy, because, you know, we want to find the chest and we don't want to give other people an edge. And so it's a very lonely existence, because usually family is like, okay, or please don't. So at least the other community members, you know, we were all in the same boat. So thankfully they kept broadcasting, and it gave us all an outlet. You know, it was like things were sort of normal, and we really needed that. So anyway, I've put together a bit of an outline here to kind of try and talk about what, you know, my stuff was, and you know, basically we've all put tons of work into this, and when you do that and you do it, like, I was an armchair searcher, so instead of doing what I wanted to be doing, which was outside hiking and enjoying the wilderness, biking, climbing, you know, whatever it was, I missed doing it. And I was doing this because I thought I had a chance. I thought, okay, I keep making progress. I guess I should keep working on it whenever I get a chance. Unfortunately, that wasn't very often. You know, you have family, and, you know, you can't choose to do this instead of helping out family and friends. You can't live with yourself with that. And at the same time, you're like, well, now that it's found, if I was close and it was found, and I could have found it if I had sacrificed that, you know, those are the what ifs, you know. What is it? That of all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these: what might have been, right? So we're all gonna have to suffer with what might have been. Anyway, so let's see, what do I have here? Oh yeah, the other reason, obviously, the reason I'm doing this is because, you know, I did put a lot of work into this, and I do want to know if I was close or not. And if I was close, if I was on the right track, and the solve comes out, and I say, hey, I was on the right track, look at me, I got everything right, you know, they're all going to say, okay, Monday morning quarterback, or whatever that term is, right? They're all going to say, sure you were. We all were, right? And I'd like to avoid that. So if I make this video now, I at least have that. I at least have the fact that, hey, you were on the right track. And so yeah, I'm making this video for a couple reasons, and I figure I don't know when I'm going to release it because I know it's stupid. I know it's really stupid, but I have this tiny little hope thread of a, you know, just holding on to anything hope. There's going to be some sort of second place prize. I don't think logistically it's likely. You know, I just don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, right, then I'll hold off on publishing this video. But if the finder, you know, decides to not release the solve at all, then I can't wait to release this thing, because if anyone thinks there's something to this, right, if they think they can further this into a solution, then, well, there's no prize left. So the only prize left is figuring the thing out. So I say we all work together. We all throw ourselves into the mix, you know, and see if we can finish this thing. And as a community, we can come together and do everything possible to solve it, because there's no more reason for secrecy. There's no prize. And that would be really exciting. So yeah, so I'll totally release it if he says he's not going to release the solve at all. And obviously if the solve gets released, this will have been up on YouTube, but privately set. So I can at least say I wasn't a Monday morning quarterback. And K-Pro keeps asking people, would you rather have been close, or would you rather have been really far away, right? And I've always been torn. It's a double-edged sword. It's gonna suck either way. I mean, come on. Let's see, if you were close, then you're gonna have a billion what ifs of what if I had made it a priority and spent more time on it. If you were really close, you're gonna say, if only there was more time, right? If you were super far away, you know, at least you got the bonus of thinking, well, thank God it was found. I didn't waste any more time on it. But at the same time, you're thinking, Jesus, I wasted a lot of time trying to figure this stupid thing out, and I wasn't even close, right? So we've all got that madness that's been running around our minds now since it was found a few days ago. Ah, and look at all this. I have so much. Okay, let's see, what else was there? I guess without further ado, I better start the funeral. Okay, first off, a toast to Forrest. You know, you gave all of us regular people, right? You gave us regular people an opportunity at something great. And that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We all had the same chance. You know, you didn't have to be a physicist, a code breaker, you know, you just had to think. And as painful as it hurts to not have been the one, I had a chance. And so did all of you. We all had a chance to find it. So just as Forrest says, you know, I hope the finder, the best. The very best. And please release the solve so we know what happened. Anyway, to you, Forrest, for creating a chase. I'm sorry it didn't last 100 years or more. Cheers, everybody. Okay, I need 2 or 3 more of those. All right, well, I have to organize all this, so once I organize it, I'll get to you know, all the work I had done and what I think about the potential. So I hadn't solved anything, but I think I was getting close. So anyway, all right. I'm going to organize now. Okay, I've had a couple of these, right? So after 4 years, almost 5, keeping everything as secret as I can from anybody, just in case I want to leave a second place prize, I am going to talk about everything. I can imagine you guys understand how hard that is. I mean, I've been seeing people come out with their solves on like YouTube and stuff, people saying, I thought it was here, I thought it was there. Well, mine is an armchair searcher's perspective, right? Everything I've done is from an armchair searcher's perspective, because everything I found suggested this was an armchair search. But you can see a little intense there, over there, that stack thing that's going on. And that's why I had to make this little outline, because I'm like, okay, I need to get through this in less than 4 hours, right? Let's start with some of the fun stuff, right? So the treasure was most likely found June 5th, and we know there's 2 June 5th postmarks in the book. I've always wondered how that would come into play with when it was found or when it had to be found. You know, we have a lot of shadow references. And so my hope is that once you solved it, you realized that you had to be somewhere June 5th to finish it, right? A physical presence is required to complete the solve. So I was hopeful it was going to be some fun Indiana Jones style location that way. Although it was found under a blanket of stars, so maybe it was at nighttime that you did this. Who knows? But either way, when it was found, when I realized it was found, like I think a day or 2 later, again, here comes the pain. But when I realized, you know, it was found and it was found on that date, I was like, okay, it's probably legit. You know, there was nothing in me that said, you know, no, it's false. I went, oh, yep, that makes sense. So that's kind of fun. So a June 5th thing, I really, really hope to learn what that was about. I just, you know, is it going to be something where the moon crest over somewhere, or your shadow projected itself in a certain way? And we know with the 2 June 5th stories, so this is anyone who studies the postmarks, which there aren't many. I met no one. I know there were people before who studied the postmarks. I think Gypsy's Kiss studied the postmarks. But anyway, so there's 2 June 5th postmarks. One is in Goldenmore, where the poem is located in that chapter. And then, of course, the other is in My Brother Being Skippy. And what's curious about that postmark is that the June 5th is the only postmark on the other side of the page compared to all the rest. So one of my theories, considering the 039 and the 141, and I'll go into that later, was that somehow the information derived from the postmark of Skippy, from the Skippy chapter, was going to give us an intersection point. So Skippy was, you know, always off doing something else, right? So he was the 141 of the postmark. So if you put on a map, for those of you who don't know, in the postmarks, in these paragraphs, 039 is seen, as well as in one of them, 141, and that's the Skippy one. And that always caught up in my mind because I'm like 039, 141, 039, 141. And I thought, oh, you know, if those were 2 points on a map, and you put the 039 down here and the 141 up here, right? The 039 would go this way, and the 141 would go this way. And you would essentially make an X on a map. So I always thought the Skippy chapter most likely had something to do with the intersection point. It gave us the intersection for the line going this way on a map. I've always thought that that's, you know, how that potentially could play out. So, you know, hopefully we'll find out. But the June 5th's always caught up in my mind. Okay, what else? Oh, so I think the starting point is Madison Arm, and that's based off of what I found about the words mad, I, sun, arm, or mad is on arm. From the very beginning, I thought this has got to be a word or an information mining mission, where somehow you use the poem, and the poem takes you to the word or the information that you require. And so I kind of started off that way, as evidenced by all this work. Oh God, I need another one of these. This is really hard. So much of my life went into this, and it wasn't, you know, essentially it wasn't time that went into this, it was thought. So I didn't have a lot of time to work on this. But before bed, after waking up, I had a half hour to think about it, you know? So, yeah. And then, of course, in my spare time, I worked on it instead of doing all this stuff I loved. Really hard. I was very jealous of you searchers who were boots on the ground all the time. Even though I didn't think you were going to solve it, God, you were doing what I wanted to do, which was get outside. Okay, anyway. All right, so moving on from some of the fun stuff that hopefully we'll know soon, is we've got what my premise was starting out. Oh, hold on. You doing good there, Buff? Oh, I'd like to put something to rest. Okay. This is Buffy. I was approached by a searcher once who said something about getting the dog, you know, to get in good with Forrest because it looked like Willie. Well, just so you know, during a luncheon with a bunch of searchers, and Forrest happened to be there. Hi, cutie. I was showing him pictures of my dogs, and I showed him a picture of Buffy here, and I said, "Hey, that might be a good dog for you. They're incredibly loyal to a fault, and they're pretty easy to take care of." And next thing I know, maybe a month later, he's got Willie. And I thought, was that me? So anyway, the one, downfall with Buffy here is that she got pretty attached to my grandma. So this is my grandma's dog. Now mine. Yeah. Yeah. And the downfall is that this Buffy here, this dog here, she's too attached to her owner, so she has separation anxiety, like you would not believe. So I have to take her everywhere. So of course I had to take her to Fenbury, and yeah, that comment started a whole rumor that I had purchased Buffy just so I could get in good with Forrest. So rest assured, Buffy, who is, what are you, 12, 13 now? Getting too old. Don't do that. She came into my custody after my grandma passed. So yeah, she was not purchased or somehow maneuvered in order to get in good with Forrest. A little aside. All right, let's go. Let's go. Let's get back to the chase. There you go. Okay, I know none of you cared about that. boy, this is hard. I'm really glad I've had a few of these. All right, so my premise starting out. These are the basics. These are kind of the parameters I set up for myself just to avoid any kind of rabbit holes. So Forrest said, I got into this so I saw the article in 2013, but I was busy refinishing my house. We had bought a fixer-upper house, and so I had to refinish that to get out of Houston and get back to Colorado. Long story. Anyway, so I saw the article in 2013, but it wasn't until 2015 till I got into this. So I guess I've been working on it for about 4 or 5 years. Okay, so Forrest, at that point, Forrest had already said a lot. One of the things he always said was that he hopes people are looking for it 100 or 1,000 years later. And to me, that pretty much said that anyone of average intelligence is going to know that you need everything to be self-contained, in the book. Because information comes and goes in this world, Information, you don't know what information is going to last 100 to 1,000 years. So as long as you have the book, you can solve the poem. So I would always go back to that whenever I kind of found myself stretched too thin over information, is go back to the book and the poem. The other thing is he stressed imagination. I assume he did this because he assumed a lot of brainiacs were going to be going after this thing, and that without imagination you weren't going to get anywhere. So, and what I found was a complete marriage of information and knowledge was required for what I saw. Oh, and the best part, everybody, the best part, the reason I got involved in the first place is it's solvable. It's solvable. It's not the Superstition mountains. It's not something that somebody didn't want anyone else to solve unless they happened to find certain information. He wanted people to eventually solve this thing. I mean, yeah, once in a lifetime for this kind of a treasure. So, those were basically my parameters. You got to have some parameters to start attacking this thing. The first thing I did was look at the poem, and I looked at the poem and I'm like, bah! Like, I have no chance in Hades to solve this thing, right? It's not gonna happen. And so I'm like, well, I'll get the book. Obviously I did the same thing everyone else did. I looked at Ojo Caliente in both places. I did all that basic stuff, and I'm like, but still, obviously if this is supposed to last 100 to 1,000 years, I have no idea. So then I purchased the book, and I was wary because, it's $35 plus shipping, and I'm like, that's a lot of money. It's still money, right? So eventually I purchased that, and I started exploring, and I found some anomalies, and I thought, okay, I'll start exploring these anomalies. And of course it led to this insanity. Insanity! The cliffs of insanity! Princess Bride reference. Okay. All right, so I'm going to edit this so that it bounces, it goes a little bit smoother. But let's see here. Oh my gosh, we have to actually dive into stuff now. I have to bare my soul. I mean, that's what it feels like. I know I'm not bearing my soul. I know that. But it certainly feels that way. Okay, all right, focus. Okay, I can do this. I can do this. Okay, goofy. Looking goofy. So to start out, I'm an information gatherer. That's what I'm best at, right? I gather information. So I started doing that. And let's see if we have... So one thing Forrest has said, I mean more than once, right, was go back to the poem, go back to the poem, go back to the poem. Eventually we found out that the first clue was indeed begin at where warm waters halt. And you go back to that. If you don't have where warm waters halt, you have nothing. Nothing. So I went off of that premise. When I first started analyzing things, I analyzed the poem. And some of the most important stuff I would say that I got from the poem was, and let's see, make sure I kind of say this clearly. Oh yeah, there we go. So if you analyze and you're counting everything in the poem, one thing you'll notice is that it has a structure. The first stanza is 25 words. The next two are 27, and the next three are 29. To me, that said to put it in a structure, right? You have 29, 29, 29, 27, 27, and 25 up there. Because Forrest had said he was an architect drawing that poem. And once I formed the structure of the poem, I thought, what would we do with that? And one thing you have to remember with information is that when you're creating like an armchair search, there's two basic forms of hiding things. You disguise them and you disperse them. And so I also went off of that premise because we needed enough information to get us to the exact spot. And at the same time, it's supposed to take 100 to 1,000 years and not use complicated codes and things like that. So I'm like, okay, so if there is a code, right, it's really going to be something that Forrest has created. So anyway, so I formed the poem into this triangular-like structure. Another thing you'll notice that is really interesting is that the sentence right before the poem, the sentence that contains the poem, has 23 words. So we have 23, 25, 27, 29. And obviously it's like, okay, that's interesting. For me, I couldn't figure out if you see that one in the upper corner here. So I'm like, is that an extra stanza? You know, what am I supposed to do with that 23? And I'll go into that in a little bit. Anyway, so we've got the structure. Another thing you'll notice about the poem is that it is missing an X. It has every letter but X, right? And you're like, okay. And even better than that, there's a single stanza. The stanza of, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease. But tarry scant with marble gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. That entire stanza has every letter of the alphabet except X. So, you know, these are things that are catching up in your mind. Now, I've analyzed the poem, and that's probably the most significant stuff I found about it. The other thing I analyzed is the postmarks. The one that gets, the one that Forrest kind of throws you off of by saying there's nothing to them. But technically, he never lied. I'm going to show you kind of the stuff that I found going on with them, and it was very important, at least for what I found. And technically, he didn't lie. Okay, so when you analyze the postmarks and you correct them, because you have to correct them, some of them are missing the years, and to find the years, you have to read the stories. The stories have information in them to correct the years to the proper year, except for one story, okay? So I would just love for someone to tell me, is Gypsy Magic 1935 or 1940? God, please, somebody tell me. Anyway, most of them you can correct the year and it's no problem. And then you have the year that you correct, and then you have the days of the week. Many people have noticed how the days of the week are wrong. Whenever there's a year that's there, the day of the week is incorrect. So you have to correct the days of the week. And I did that. And when I did that, I realized the Tuesday was missing. And I'm like, okay, so Forrest hates Tuesdays. I'm like, why is the Tuesday missing? And then I realized there's only 6 days of the week represented. And there's 6 stanzas, right? I think I need to, I'm gonna have some. Cheers, everybody. God, this is painful. So I realized, okay, so you correct the days of the week and there's only 6. Well, that would line up with the 6 stanzas. The other thing you find is that there are 9 months represented in those postmarks. And there just happen to be 9 sentences and 9 clues, right? So my brain is like, all right, so let's line up the days of the week with the stanzas and the months with the sentences. And as I was thinking about the disguise and disperse, I'm like, well, that would be a great technique. And so I kind of came up with this, you know, setup where, you know, a story, there's 20 postmarks, right? And so 20 postmarks related to either a day of the week or a month. And I kind of threw them all together. So that's the postmarks. Oh, some other really fun things that happen with the postmarks. You can obviously arrange the postmarked stories by month, by year, by day of the month, by day of the week, right? Well, when I started organizing them per month, things started to kind of pop out. One thing that popped out was the words, the letters that, you know, were inside the postmark. You know, there's these words that go up and down. In the 2 April stories, one has temp, T-E-M-P, that intrudes the postmark, and one has S. And if you put them together, the 2 April stories postmarks say temps, right? And that kind of supported the potential for what the keyword might be. So, begin it where warm waters halt. My mind is like, you know, since this is a word mining story, I'm like, begin it where the word warm halts, in the book maybe, or in the poem, and then your effort will be worth the cold said, yes, indeed, you know, cold is probably the key word. But warm seems important too, and at the same time I noticed that the word hot had been added to a story that appeared in the Bozeman Chronicle, and then it later appeared in this book, and I thought, why do we add hot? Is it to disguise the function of hot, like maybe hot's most important here and we're going to throw it in here to, you know, confuse you? Or was it required? Right, so at this point I'm like, okay, temps seem to be important. So I started exploring cold, warm, and hot. And like these are I think cold, warm, and hot are important. And of course, if anybody reads that Frosty story, dear God, that story plagued me for years because I knew it was telling me something. But what was it telling me? We knew that Frosty made the rules. So the word cold somehow is going to make the rules and tell me what to do. But how, right? How is that? And grandma seemed to be associated with warm. Grandma makes hot pies. Forrest eats hot pies. Because there's this like a second grandma story where grandma makes pies and Forrest eats hot pies. There's also an element to that story where Forrest goes in the back door. There's something about Forrest going in the back. And that will come into play later when I talk about what I found. Okay, so far we've got the poem structure, the missing acts, the overlaid days of the week, and the overlaid 9 months associated with the 9 sentences. So the missing acts. Okay, so I started exploring the stories, and one of the stories I explored first was the Bonko story, Father on the Bonko, because it was the only one with one single paragraph. And I thought, well, if I'm going to test methodologies, let's start with that story. And that's where this will come into play. And get it here. You see, poem Bonko, Teachers with Ropes analysis. One thing you will find with the Bonko, see if I can There we go. Okay, so that's the story. And the more you dive in, the more you find. One of the first things I realized, because I did a lot of counting, because I figured this has got to be some sort of word mining operation. So I started counting stuff. Well, the Banco has 166 words in it, exactly the same as the poem. It also happens to have 9 sentences, exactly the same as the poem. However, the 9 sentences don't have the same word count. And so my brain is like, okay, what's the function of that? And I'm like, well, if it doesn't have the same word count, then maybe in the sentences, then maybe that's another way to disguise and diffuse information. So I started lining up everything together. So word for word, where is that? So basically I started doing things like this. So first of all, I laid out the poem with the Banco per sentence, right? And obviously since they're not the same, some sentences have more words from the poem going than the Banco. And then I also did a word for word setup, 1 through 166. Same. And I'll put this aside because thank God for editing. It's going to be here somewhere. That information I need is here somewhere. Found it. Okay. So when I realized that the Banco story matched the poem, I'm like, it's highly probable there's some function to it. And again, another way to disguise and disperse information. So here's one of the ways that I laid everything out as far as word for word, 1 through 166 words lined up. First off, I went 1 through 166, and then I went 1 through 166 up, in case there was some sort of reverse code being used, right? That actually came in handy, I think, later on. Okay, so far we've got the poem, which resembles some sort of structure, and we've got there, and we've got the Banco story mimicking the poem, and we've got the postmarks, the numbers matching up with the stanzas and the number of sentences. So I'm starting to think, okay, this could be a part of the potential solve. Let's see, what else do we notice about the Banco story? There's some curious things that occur in the Banco story. Again with the postmarks, the Banco story is 1930, the year Forrest Fenn was born, and he talks about it here. And so we've got an association with the Banco story with his first year of existence. We also have within the postmarks, it says North Main Street, which was his home in Temple, Texas. And as I talked about before, 039 is found in the postmarks, and 141 is found in the postmarks once. And that's the Skippy story, and that postmark is on the other side, suggesting that it forms the intersection for the X, the information mined from that. What I found curious about this is that the postmark in this story has the 039 in it. but not the 141. Instead, it says North Main Street. But North Main Street was 1413 North Main Street. So I'm like, wait a second. 039141, this has the X. I'm like, this has to have the X in it. The missing X, right? So as I'm going through the story, there's one single X in the story, and it is experience, and it's the last word. So pairing up with the poem, you get experience and gold being in the same place. And then I thought, okay, is this a methodology? So I looked at all the letters in the Bonko story and realized every letter existed in the Bonko story except for J. And I'm like, okay, is there a J in the poem? And so I went over to the poem and I realized there's two J's, two. And both of them are the 22nd word in the sentence. So two separate sentences in the poem, and just is the 22nd word in both those sentences. So I'm like, okay, that seems like something important. So we've got the missing X that is found in the Bonko story, the missing J, which is found in the poem, and honestly, I think that's an end game kind of thing, and I still haven't figured it out. All right, so we've got the poem structure, the overlay of the days of the week and the months with the 9 sentences, and we've got the Bonko story, which mimics it, and we have a missing X in the poem, which we find in the Bonko, and a missing J, which we find in the poem. All right, so this is me basically accumulating stuff that I'm like, what is this doing? Oh yeah, and we have when you assemble the postmarks per the April story, the 2 April stories have the word temps, right? Keying us into the word cold, warm, and hot. And the Frosty story telling us that the word cold is somehow setting the rules. Okay, one other thing I discovered that could be a function of this is the My War for Me story. So I'm continuing my quest on finding anomalies, finding functions that I need to be aware of before I start trying to solve this thing. And in the My War for Me story, we have 2 drop caps. And anyone who knows, we have 32 drop caps in the entire book. We have 27 sections, technically, because, you know, there's no way to, there's no 1 through 27 in any table of contents, so we just have to guess. And the My War for Me story has 2 drop caps. And I'm a counter, right? I'm counting things. That's how I'm finding stuff. And if you count the paragraphs in the second drop cap of My War for Me, you get 79 to 80 paragraphs. It's a little tricky at the end because there is one sentence. So of course we forgot. And it's not a full paragraph. And the sentence following it doesn't indent, so I think it's the same paragraph, but there's no words out. Anyway, it's confusing. 79 or 80. And I thought, okay, so it seems curious that there's 79 to 80 paragraphs, and Forrest was 79 to 80 when he hit the treasure. And I'm like, maybe, you know, this is some sort of function. You know, this is part of what we need to know. As I was, you know, at first I had, you know, counted the paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized, technically, the first year of life is 0 until you're 1 year old. And so I'm like, so technically the first paragraph is 0. And so it'd be 0, 1, 2, blah, blah, blah. After I corrected that, there were 3 different instances in the paragraphs in My War for Me where a number mimicked Forrest Fenn's age. And I kept thinking, you know, is it a coincidence? Is it a confirmer? Is he saying, yeah, you know, you do need to associate these paragraphs with my age? And I don't know for sure. So basically, I'm like, well, that could be another way to disguise and disperse information. Something about knowing Forrest Fenn's age, which we would from his 1930, in the Bonko story, he tells us he was born in 1930. So something with Forrest Fenn's age and the paragraphs. And I'm like, okay, because this story sticks out like a sore thumb. It's like, this does not fit in with the rest of these stories. So there's got to be, and he says, read this no matter what. So I'm like, there's got to be a reason. There's 2 drop caps, and there's got to be a reason that this is such a different sort of thing. Also, in this drawing, it's one of the few where Forrest looks at you. He looks directly at you holding the headstone. Kind of like saying, you found it, you solved it, something like that. So, at this point, I have the poem Bonko crossover, right? I've got the postmarks reflecting the 9 sentences and the 9 months and the days of the week and the 6 stanzas. So I've got like this framework to work from. But the question is, what do you do with all this knowledge, right? What the heck do you do with all this knowledge? Well, according to the poem, the effort will be worth your cold, right? The effort will be worth my cold. And I'm like, cold has to be telling me something. It has to be teaching me something. And so I started exploring cold. I wonder if there's stuff in here. I think there is. Here's Surviving Myself. And Father Bonko. And poem structure. I'm going to read these. As you can see, I did a lot of work on analyzing things. An insane amount of work. Analyzing every bit to see if something would catch up. And things did. Things caught up. So the word cold is found 14 times in this book. And then, of course, warm and hot. And I kept thinking, what's my keyword? Well, according to the Frosty story and the other grandma story, Frosty makes the rules. Cold is going to make the rules. But warm and hot also seem to be important. Hot seems to be associated with Forrest Fenn. Warm seems to be associated with Grandma. Grandma makes pies, right? And so I've got this structure here that I've created by way of number counting, word counting. And I thought, there's a lot of circle imagery in this book. What if this triangle actually forms a circle, right? We just need to push it out just a little bit and we get a circle. And I'm like, so maybe that's the pie. I'm like, well, that could be. And so I'm starting to extrapolate that potentially the key words, so the key words in the poem, start us off on a journey of information gathering, potentially mostly word gathering. And so the key words we find in the book, the word cold, which is 14 times in the book, and warm and hot. And they will eventually give us information that we use with this poem structure to then get to the next word and the next word. And then when that ends, we go to the next clue and have another set of keywords. And those keywords then lead us on the same adventure. So in my mind, I'm like, it seems obvious that the poem in this, structure made into a circle is used to guide us to the next, but we need the keywords to start off the whole catalyst. And we need cold to tell us how this catalyst works. And I was knee deep in that when the treasure was found. I was discovering stuff I was kind of excited about. Let's see here. Okay, so here's some of the fun stuff. So I started looking at cold and doing the word count stuff. In my Spanish toy factory, it has no postmark but it does say it's 1943. So you have a year. So I'm like, okay, so for some reason we need a year to go along with this. And it has the word hot and the word cold in it. And I'm like, okay, this is the only non-postmarked story that has hot and cold in it. And it doesn't have warm. So what is it trying to tell us? And one thing you'll notice is that, so you're trying to look at things, and one thing I looked at was the year, 1943. And I'm like, well, let's count to the 43rd word. And in the fourth paragraph, the 43rd word is pies. One thing you'll notice once you've laid this system out, word for word with the bonko, right? In the poem, if you do the poem in reverse, well, first of all, the 124th word in the poem is seek. And if you do that in reverse, the 43rd word in the poem is seek, right? You go from 1 to 166, from 1 to 166 going up. And so I'm just like, I'm like, oh, so I seek pies. Pies is the 43rd word. So in reverse, I seek pies. And that was starting to add up with stuff I was finding about other words. When I looked at the word count in warm, it was the 9th and the 16th word count in its respective sentences. When you coordinate that with the months, you actually find that in the 2 April stories, the word warm is the 16th word in, I think, 3 different positions. So in 3 different sentences throughout those 2 different paragraphs, the word warm is still the 16th word in the sentence. And you're like, okay, that's interesting. And then in another month, the word warm in different stories is the 9th word in the sentences. And I'm like, okay, so if we were to take the alphabet and go 1 through 26, the 16th letter would be P, and the 9th letter would be I. So I'm like, okay, so we get pie. So the seek pies thing from the Finnish Toy Factory made sense to me. So pie seems to be a theme throughout figuring this thing out. 9 and 16 seem to be associated with that. And in my Spanish Toy Factory, the word cold, if you count in forward, the word cold is the 9th in the sentence, and if you count in reverse, it's the 16th in the sentence. And to me, I'm like, okay, so it just told me to line up P and I. And when you do that, the way to line up P and I is to drop, so it's like a little mini code, A through X, X through A, instead of A through Z, Z through A. So it's a 1 through 24, 24 through 1 kind of code. And so I'm assuming that's what he's trying to tell us to do, is that we line up P and I, and, we form a little mini code kind of thing. It's not really a code, but who knows. Another thing you realize, and again, let's emphasize it's all about counting here and imagination as far as what the counting is telling you, is the word hot in my Spanish Toy Factory, the only story without a postmark that has the words hot and cold in it. If you count the number in the paragraph that the word hot is, you get 27. And when you count in reverse, the number in the sentence is 27. So I'm like, okay, he's associating these 2 different ways of counting with each other and with 27. And so this is one of the things I was on the verge of exploring when it was found, but obviously 27 sections of the book, I'm like, I wonder if somehow he's going to start, this is telling us how to go to a certain section in the book to locate whatever it is you're locating. Just a potential. But either way, it was associating those. So that was my Spanish Toy Factory. Once I realized there was a potential code, a potential A through X, X through A kind of code being used for something, I started exploring the odd lists, right? And the odd capitalized letters in certain paragraphs. And a few interesting things, started popping up. And those are, I mean, they're interesting, but I guess they're a little less easy to explain. I was only on the verge of figuring those things out, like I say, when it was found. Okay. So, I'm assuming that the poem structure, which most likely is more of a circle, just like in all the circle imagery, is going to be part of it. The poem Bonko layout, right, is going to be part of it. And the My War for Me is going to be part of it. Let's see here. Oh, here's another odd thing about the GMA stories, right? So, a grandma character makes hot pies, Forrest eats hot pies out back, and Cold makes the rules. Obviously, there's something with the, backside of stuff in Forrest. My assumption is that it had to do with counting, since that's what I seem to have been finding. So Forrest has something to do with the backside counting. So all the counting done with a keyword on the backside. The reverse, right? So you count from the last word in the paragraph up to where the keyword is. And you count from the last word in the sentence up to where the keyword is. And that kind of showed itself more and more in stuff that I was doing. And then the forward counting had more to do somehow with Frosty. There's another interesting thing about My War for Me. So the very first paragraph in My War for Me is the one that in the second drop cap, right, has the word umbilical in it. My assumption is that that could be a hint / confirmer that it is associated with Forrest Fenn's age. So that first paragraph has the word umbilical in it, and it's 0. Forrest Fenn is 0 age. And sentences, postmarks. Oh, one of the fun things that Forrest said once is it doesn't help to stretch a tangent. And to me that said because you can't make an X, no lines cross. And you need to cross lines to make this work. Alright, we got that. We got the keywords. Grandma makes pie. Bliss. Oh, this is the other thing. And this is where I think maybe the A through X, X through A code would come into play. But Forrest buys the pies for 5 cents. There's a lot of things that suggest Forrest needs 5 things to get pie or to eat pie. Nickels were magic, right? And so, I'm wondering what I'm missing as far as he needs 5 things. What are those 5 things? Are those 5 things achievable by the lists, by the capital letters in certain, I don't know. Okay. Now back to analyzing, basically, how do I set this up? It's like, what month do I set up? Per month, per year, per what? And I started arranging things accordingly, just in case it might be done one way or the other. So like, these are all the stories I scanned in the book, of course. These are all the stories, but they're arranged chronologically per year, as best as I could guesstimate that story might have a certain year. And some of the postmarks, the non-postmark stories, were very clear. The Biddies story, My Spanish Toy Factory, those years were very clear. And so it seemed like, for some reason, you needed to know the years for those stories. Okay, but I started exploring. So, like I said earlier, the word warm seemed to be exhibiting behavior that was significant according to the months. So the 2 April stories had the word warm in it, I think 3 times, and in those 3 sentences, every time it was the 16th word in the sentence. And then the other month had it in the 9th word in that sentence. So I'm like, okay, that is suggesting that it's important, let alone the fact that it was 9 and 16, right? 16 being P, 9 being I. So we're searching for pi. So I started arranging things per month to start things off, and I figured that's when I should start analyzing. I should start analyzing the colds first in those two stories. So the two April stories are Surviving Myself and, there we go, Teachers with Ropes. Those are the two April stories. They're also, coincidentally, the two stories that have the word alpha in them, right? So it says start here, alpha. Once you start doing that, some really curious things start happening, but only if you get the count correct. See, you got to get the count correct. So you'll realize the word cold is in these stories. In the Surviving Myself story, it's listed twice in one paragraph and once in a paragraph that's right towards the end, which I think is subterfuge. And then in the Teachers with Rope stories, all three of them are in a single paragraph. And again, counting. So I start counting these to find out what the heck they're trying to tell me. And one thing you'll notice in the Teachers with Rope story is that the word cold, the third cold in that paragraph, is the 166th word. Same as the poem, 1 through 166. And so obviously the word cold is telling you something about, using this with the poem to try and learn what you're supposed to be doing. And then the first cold in that paragraph is the 124th word, which in the poem, the 124th word is seek. So we're supposed to seek cold. So we're seeking pies and we're seeking cold. So that's the basics. I start analyzing this. And one of the major things I notice is that if you recall, I was telling you about the poem structure, the 25, 27, 29, right? Well, there's also a 23. The sentence that contains the poem has 23 words in it. And I'm like, what is the function of that? Well, one of the functions I found was that if you count, where is it? There we go. So in Surviving Myself, the paragraph that contains the two colds, the very first sentence has 23 words in it. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, if I wanted to mess with somebody, right? And I wanted somebody to learn something. If I wanted them to learn something, I would make it really hard for them to find out how to learn about it. So if it's about word counting, making sure that you don't start counting, the 1 through 166 until after the 23 words, right? That it would be great subterfuge. So once I started kind of being like, okay, let's see if that's potentially what you're supposed to do, I started finding more stuff. I started finding more curiosities, more anomalies. In the Teachers with Ropes one, what I found most interesting is the last word, the last cold is the 166th word, but not in its own sentence. The sentence continues on, and there just happened to be 23 words left in the sentence after the word cold. And I'm like, he's telling us to count in reverse. He's telling us to use this information in reverse. So again, as I started doing that, I started being like, oh my gosh, he's telling us this. And the more you look into the numbers, the more you find Teachers with Ropes and My War for Me are opposites of each other. It's really cool. So it's the word cold in Teachers with Ropes is in the 5th paragraph, counting forward. And it's in the 8th paragraph, counting in reverse. In the Surviving Myself story, the word cold is in the 8th paragraph, counting forward, and the 5th paragraph, counting in reverse. So there were plenty of confirmers saying, hey, they're opposites of each other. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. Let's see here. Here's one interesting thing I did not, I found, but I didn't find a reason or conclusion for. I started just doing word counts here and there, just to see what I could find. One thing I found was that in the Surviving Myself story, the words the and, the first 3 thes are all the 9th word in their respective sentences. The first 3 ands are all the 16th word in their respective sentences in this story. And, you know, pie, right? And the second of the 3 thes and ands have a very curious structure in the sentence. If you count forward, the is the 9th in the sentence, and the and is the 16th. But if you count in reverse, the and is the 9th in the sentence, and the is the 16th. And to me, again, this said something about matching up pi in this A through X. In this, you know, A through X kind of alphabet cipher, you know, simple cipher kind of thing. The blue letters, as you can see, that's pi, the actual pi, 3.141, right? Overlaid onto the alphabet code system. You know, it's an extra step that I hope Forrest didn't do, but if he did, I wanted to be prepared for it. This is not something I figured out. I was just figuring this out when it was found. So there you go. All right, so make sure I'm here. Yeah, seek pies. Okay. All right, so recap again. We've got the poem layout, which most likely is more of a circle. And we've got overlaying it with the days of the week with the 6 stanzas and the months with the 9 sentences. We've got the My War for Me, which has the 79 to 80 paragraphs and the second drop cap, and the confirmers within. We've got the Bonko story and the poem, and somehow they overlay. My guess is it's going to be something like this. This is the, you know, so this is the poem laid out in the structure. This is the Bonko story laid out in the structure. And something you'll notice is that, like I said before, the poem structure, the word count in the stanzas gave us this poem structure. Whereas the word count per sentences and stanzas are completely different in the Bonko if applied to the same structure. Meaning it's a way to disperse information, give us different information by way of using, you know, the similarities between the two. So what I started to do, you know, after I've discovered a lot of this stuff, is like, okay, what's the function of this stuff? How does it all work together? My guess is that, you know, and I said this before, but the basics are, you've got the poem. It gives you this structure. Which is really a circle. You've got the Bonko, which can be overlaid with that structure. You've got the My War for Me, and you've got this A through X code. They're all going to combine to send us on a journey, starting with the keywords. The keywords give us information. We use this stuff to translate that information into another location for more words. So that's basically the concept I was going after. As I started to do that, when I went after, was it Surviving Myself? Yeah. So I went after word counting in Surviving Myself first. and using it with the Bonko layout. And one thing very interesting occurred, and I know it's complicated, but hey, you know, we'll see. There's everything I was testing out to see if I could get to something worthwhile. So the way I did it was, I took the word cold and, you know, minus the first 23 words, I started counting with, you know, 1 through 23 and then 1 through 166. That's how I did my word count. And then I took the equivalent word, you know, they're all 1 through 166. I took the equivalent word that would have been in the Bonko, and I put it in, you know, and I counted that location in that sentence. I know that sounds complicated. Terrible explaining things. Basically, I went from word in a paragraph to word in the poem Bonko setup, 1 through 166, and that word location within that sentence, I then counted what number that word was within the sentence, forward and backward. And there's 3 colds in the Surviving Myself story. And when I did that, I found that that paired up word in Bonko gave me the third word number in that sentence. Statistically, the middle one is less likely. These are meh, right? But the middle one is less likely. And so I got 3 3s, right? And I'm like, okay, so I think that's the function of the poem Bonko comparison, is that we're going to get a word location in a paragraph, which will match up with a word location in the Bonko. And then we count what the location of that in the sentence. And again, like I say, just started into this stuff. Let's see, and what else was interesting in there? Oh, yeah, so when I counted, and this one I don't know if it's like definitely something there or not, because it was a lot of just a house of mirrors, just total house of mirrors here. But when I counted the word cold in reverse and paired it up with the poem Bonko words, you know, because there's words associated with these. So you go into, so let's see if I can explain this here. Okay, so you take the paragraph that the word cold is in Surviving Myself, and you count in reverse, and the word cold in reverse is the 80th, the 101st, and the 132nd word. When you go to that word in the Bonko, or I mean the poem and the Bonko, you get in left, nigh my, and blaze me. And that one's a little bit more iffy. I'm like, but it could be saying, you know, I'm the blaze, Forrest Fenn is the blaze, and my left and in left, basically saying count left. So I think it's telling me that things that are associated with Forrest, right, are counting from right to left. And that seemed to coincide with what I was finding. So Forrest does things in reverse. Forrest, you know, he's anti-Frosty, right? He takes the information created by the word warm, he takes grandma's pies, and he uses the reverse information from that stuff somehow. So that's kind of where I was getting with, and then, you know, when you realize that these, you know, these two stories, those paragraphs mimic each other, you're like, what the heck? So now going into Teachers with Ropes, the one that has the word cold as the 166th and as the 124th word. Let's see here. And you can see a lot of the, like I say, I analyzed the heck out of this thing. Analyze. Forward and backward, left and right, all around. Okay, so it seemed to me that in Teachers with Ropes, what he was trying to establish was the functionality of reverse counting. And so I started doing, you know, I started really employing the poem Banco setup in forward and reverse, 1 through 166 and 166, and 166 through 1. And you indeed find some curiosities. For instance, you see here certain words matched up that were just so interesting. Begin and concluded. Begin and concluded matched up. And I'm like, okay, right? That seems interesting. It was also, counting in reverse, begin and concluded was the 141st word. So we had, and in reverse, the 43rd word was seek. So we've got a few things that kind of kept matching up, and you know, catching up in your mind as being some sort of function. So in Teachers with Ropes, one of the colds, when counted in reverse, is the 87th word. And the 87th word is blaze me, right? So in reverse, blaze me is the 80th word. Forrest Fenn was 79 or 80 when he hit the chest. So again, right, some sort of insinuation about a reverse count being associated with Forrest, potentially My War for Me, potentially, you know, the blaze is Forrest. And so that's kind of the gist of what I was getting out of. Teachers with Ropes was teaching us reverse count, while Surviving Myself was teaching us forward count information. Okay, what else here? Oh yeah, so the other stories. So obviously I started exploring what information was coming out of the other stories as far as the word cold. And in, where's that story? The Long Ride Home, right. So in The Long Ride Home, the word cold, which is supposed to be teaching us stuff, right, is in the 5th paragraph, and it is the 43rd word. And the postmark is May, the 5th month, and May 1943. So the word cold in this seems to be associating itself with the year 1943, and that being the word count in the paragraph, and the month, May, and that being the 5th paragraph. The other interesting thing about 43 is that when you do the poem Banco thing, forward, reverse, in the reverse count, the 43rd, where is it? In reverse count, the 43rd word is seek, right? So in forward count, 124 is seek, and reverse 43 is seek. And then the word hot is in here. And I'm like, okay. So the word hot is also in here. So I started, you know, again, the forward and reverse counting while analyzing it with, you know, the My War for Me and the poem Banco setup to see what is it trying to tell me. And the word hot, oh, right. Right. There was something going on with the 74. So the years from the 2 April stories, we have 1974, and we have 1974 is Teachers with Ropes, and 1938 is the other one. There seemed to be something going on with the 74, right? 1974. In 1974, Forrest Fenn was 44 years old. And we know he's talked about that a lot. So the word hot seems to be associated with Forrest Fenn's age. In the Teachers with Ropes, the word hot was 47th in the paragraph when counted in reverse. And then you reverse that one more time, you get 74. In Surviving Myself, where we know things are supposed to be counted, you know, in forward fashion, not reverse, the word hot was the 74th word in the sentence. And then in The Long Ride Home, the word cold is the 74th word in reverse count in the sentence. So there just seemed to be something there telling me that hot was associated with the years and with Forrest Fenn and with reverse, right? That's kind of the gist I was getting from a lot of this information. Let's see here. And again, I was in the middle of this. I was found, because you haven't heard that 4,000 times. Yeah. Now, I think maybe okay, so there's a lot of little stuff that kind of started showing up, but I hadn't really fully analyzed it when it was found, so I'm kind of looking over that stuff right now. For instance, while doing some of the word counting in Tea with Olga and the 2 colds, we get 2 waters, paddle it, when you compare it with the Banco thing. 2 waters, paddle it. But again, didn't get a chance to finally analyze that. I think maybe we should go through, at this point, some of the confirmers and stuff like that. Oh, of course, to let you know. So, you know, the poem structure, I think, really is a circle. And I think with all the references, Forrest, you know, I think it's a circle where Forrest is in the middle. Forrest is the blaze, and Forrest is in the middle. Me, blaze, right? Me, blaze, just like in this poem Banco comparison, and me in the middle. And when you look at, so when you set up this, you know, structure, you'll notice that the stories associated with Saturday and the stories associated with the 9th or the 8th and the 9th sentence all seem to be curious. So the one Saturday is 1926. It's the only year that doesn't associate with Forrest Fenn's age. And the title is Me in the Middle. The only November story is the Banco story, which matches up with the poem. And the only December story is My War for Me, which matches up with Forrest Fenn's age. So my guess is that this whole stanza goes into the middle and becomes some sort of functioning something with the rest of this. This is where I kept getting stuck, though. Does this whole stanza go into the middle? Me in the middle, my war for me, the Banco story, right? It would make sense. But is the 23 count, you know, the sentence that contains the poem, the 23, is that supposed to be another stanza? Like maybe these stories are dual purpose and you put my war for me and the Banco story here and then stick that in the middle? I don't think so. I think it's more likely this stanza goes in the middle and the 23 words located before the poem are what cue you into the proper word counting for the 2 April stories. So you can properly learn what cold is trying to tell you. And warm and hot. So I think cold is setting up the rules. Warm is telling us other information, right? Warm is going to fill in these blanks with numbers, maybe. And hot is Forrest in the middle. And somehow information goes into that and then comes out of it. And goes into these stories where you locate the next word in a catalyst situation. Now as far as I made it, this is probably my most recent folder set up with really trying to analyze metaphorically what he's trying to tell us. What does he want us to do? And we've got, because if you're supposed to locate a word, so you take information that goes into here, and then this takes you back to the book. Well, are you going back to the book with simply a word that you're going to locate in the book? Or are you supposed to go to a specific section? And if you are supposed to go to a specific section, are you supposed to go to one of the drop caps, 1 through 32? Or are you supposed to go to one of the sections, one of the 27 sections? We do know that, you know, he's hinted at the collection of string, and he only tied square knots, and there just happen to be squares at the end of the chapters. And there's 26 sections that have squares in them, one does not. And, you know, that kind of goes A through Z, 26 sections. So you're always wanting to pair up those sections with the alphabet. Although, maybe what you're really supposed to do is go A through X, just like the poem. 24 lines, 24 letters in the alphabet. A through X, X through A, 1 through 24, 24 through 1, and then potentially overlay pi onto that. Let's see here. So yeah, that or the drop caps. There's 1 through 32 drop caps. And the only reason I think maybe you're supposed to go to a specific drop cap is that in the poem, the word just is the 22nd word. And we know that for some reason, certain keywords have to be the same number in their respective sentences in certain sections. And in the Golden Moor chapter, which has 2 drop caps, there's only 2 justs in the second drop cap, and those are the ones in the poem. But there's more justs in the first drop cap. So my guess is that's more that you're supposed to go to a certain one of the 32 drop cap sections. That's my guess. Okay, so here's some interesting stuff, and I don't know the purpose of it. There's a picture in the book of the treasure chest, and there's a border around it, and the border around it is the exact same border as the border around the picture of Forrest Fenn with his family when he was a little boy. So there's something associated with family being the treasure. So yeah, but like I say, I haven't figured out that connection. One of my guesses is that there's one Tuesday date in the book, and it's the date that he came home Christmas Eve to his family. So one of my guesses was that the missing Tuesday was the second drop cap section in My War for Me. And that would change this structure a little bit, because this is Saturday. So that would make like the first 23 words of the, before the poem, maybe that is a stanza where you're supposed to put the missing Tuesday. And then My War for Me, and it is out here, right? So I was having trouble with this structure and how to put it together. The epilogue is curious, right? We've got the picture of the Axeman, which I thought interesting, the Axeman, right? A through X, AX, Axeman, A through X, X through A. But we also know that it's been photoshopped. And in one of the pictures, there's 23 stumps. In another, there's 21. And I'm just like, okay. So we have the poem structure, which is 23, 25, 27, 29. And now we have this saying 21 to 23. And I'm like, okay, so are we missing another block, another stanza, another function, another component of this circular poem structure, right? And I have not figured out. I mean, my guess is that is the Axeman. So what I'm missing is that A through X thing. Or maybe it's the information about where his father was buried, right? The block 423 or whatever that was, right? Maybe this is telling us that's the last bit of information we need. Okay. Oh, Bunko. This is a lot of stuff. This is just the key information I had. Oh, Madison. Okay, so my best guess as to where the treasure lies. I believe begin at where warm waters halt is Madison Arm, and that's because of some curiosities. I thought, you know, if this is a word search kind of game, you're going to want to break up certain words, and one word to break up would be Madison, right? Mad is on, or mad eye sun, arm. And when I started doing some word counts around those words, they were curious. The word mad is the fifth word in the sentence in several different sentences. When you assemble them according to the months, that's when it gets curious. So there's an association with keywords being the same word count within the month. But that's the forward counting. The reverse counting, having most likely to do something more with Forrest and having a different process involved. So I think Madison Arm is where you start. And whether you go north or south from there, I'm not sure. My guess is north. But in the other story where he talks about, you know, I went down through the cemetery, I think that's where it was. Obviously the cemetery was north. So going down could potentially mean north. So take it in the canyon down could mean the canyon that used to be Hebgen Lake before Hebgen Dam was formed. So take it in the canyon down is there. And then my guess is up either Cabin or Beaver Creek. And in an area of 70, whatever it is, the exactly in between 10,200 and 5,000. Is that right? Yeah, 5,000 feet, 70 some hundred feet. I think it's probably exactly there on the hillside facing Hebgen and West Yellowstone, where he could pass, sing, you know, some of his most wonderful times, the most personal times, where his family was alive and the world had everything to offer. So that's my guess. It could have gone south from there. I don't know, but I'm guessing it's north from there. Okay, so that's my best guess based off of, you know, obviously just what I've found. Oh yeah, the other thing, I mean, we have several things to suggest that this is a circle with Saturday in the middle. We have Forrest being in the middle all the time, and he'd always rather be hot than cold, and but he really likes warm, right? So he's going to use the word count from warm, or the other keywords we get in the poem, brown, you know, those kinds of words. and he's going to use them, coming in the back door and out the back door. You know, the Frosty story, the Grandma Pie story, those things are telling us that how to use this, you know, how this is supposed to be used. And then all the times where Forrest is saying, you know, there was no back to fall back to, you know, Forrest is the back door thingy. And so I took that as being Forrest, it has all the word counts in the back. Let's see here, am I still recording? I think I am. Okay. Oh, yeah. So, like when you start looking into word count, you start looking into words that are curious, like brown and all those kinds of things, black and white, and you notice they do have curious word counts. So you know there's something going on with them. You know, there's something you're supposed to figure out. And I'm just going through here because it's like I say, the basic notes. Yeah, sections. Locating a word in the book. Yeah, by reading and scanning for that word. So you start off with a keyword from the poem. You locate it in the book. It takes you to various different places using My War for Me and the poem Bonko structure. And potentially the A through X code. And you find other words, and those take you to the next words. Yada, yada, yada. Some things that kind of referenced, you know, movement. We've got the buffalo who went, like, I think side to side first and then up and down. Well, side to side suggests sentence counting, left and right, right to left. And up and down, paragraph counting, up and down. You start counting at the bottom first, right? In he talks about, you know, we'd start at the bottom first for the, you know, 10 most whatever songs. He would whittle yo-yos and spinning tops. Yo-yos go up and down, spinning tops go round and round. And I'm like, well, maybe the round around is a reference to this circular structure here. Because you, like, what's the point of this structure? Why have it in a structure? Well, let's say either you're supposed to go with information from here to here, or in a circle, right? Well, this dissipates information. If it were in a line, you would get, if you went from Sunday to Monday, right, in a certain line, you would get different information than if you went from Sunday to Wednesday in a line, in a circle, I should say. So it's potentially a way to dissipate information. I could not prove that. I had not gotten to that point. And of course, Frosty, like the Frosty story. So he made a noise like a truck backing up. I'm like, that's weird. But it suggested a reverse count for the word cold. And then it also said, it made me question, wonder about his polarity. Well, that's north and south, that's up and down. So you have a reverse counting and an up and down counting of the word cold to try and figure out what you're supposed to do. So that's how I took that. Forrest goes, yeah, he uses so Forrest is the blaze, right? There's tons of things that suggest Forrest is the blaze. So that means Forrest is the fire, he's in the center. If you look at the stories, Forrest, there's a fire in the center of a lot of these stories, or a rock. And the rock one I found interesting, the fairies dancing around a rock, because initially it was supposed to be if you've been wise and found the stones, something like that. And so the stones would represent, fairies dancing around a rock. It would represent the headstones of him in the cemetery. So I'm trying to find, at the same time, artifacts of what this used to be before it evolved as to what it is. Let's see here. He's also called it, the blueprint is difficult. The one who can best adjust, and that was the reverse bicycle. Knowledge does not equal, I forget what it was, understanding. So I had all this information, but I didn't understand what it was telling me. You have to use your imagination to figure out what the heck it's telling you. And so the reverse bicycle was one thing saying, I'm supposed to be doing something in reverse. It took me a while to figure out what the heck that was. And then, of course, we also have, if anyone over the age of 12 doesn't see themselves in this mirror, well, that suggests people at the age of 13, at least, right, And we have the 1943 stories, and that is a, you know, and then in reverse, 1943 is the word seek. So there were just a lot of things that kind of came along like that. But they were all just enough of a stretch. But that's, you know, if you're going to disguise something, right, for it to be difficult to find out, it's going to be a stretch. And you have to determine which ones are worth chasing. And that was, I always had a hard time justifying spending time on things. Let's see here. But yeah, so Forrest was out of there like a cannonball on fire. He used the fire escape in the back. He came in the back door of the bakery. He had fallen back to a place where there was no back to. And he went out back to eat his pie. So there's just this whole reference to Forrest using the back of something. And that's, like I say, Forrest seems to be associated with the reverse count. All the counting on the back end of a keyword. We also know that, you know, Forrest is in the middle. Me in the middle is such a present theme in so many different things. Yeah, this is talking more about some of the stuff I found at first off. Oh, the fives. So, one thing I definitely had not figured out, well, obviously I don't have anything figured out. I was just starting to learn the word cold, warm, and hot. We're just starting to tell me what to do with all this stuff. Oh, this hurts. Oh, okay, yeah, just a little bit more. Okay. Five. So, Forrest is associated with needing 5 things. But what to do with those 5 things, right? So he needed 5 cents to buy a pie. He needed 5 birds to feed his family. So 5 seems to be associated with his family. They crossed 5 states to get where he was going. You know, there's a lot of references to something about, like in the Kluani story, he needed 5 things to watch the Broncos play the Cowboys. And, you know, he lists them. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, is the 5 things somehow associated with this A through X code? Or is it associated with the numbers we get from the word warm? And like I say, I was starting to explore that. But, you know, he gave each of the 6 cats 5 squirts. You know, I'm just like, is that subterfuge there, or is that required information like the Frosty story? 1 hour operation turned into 5. There seems like there's something to it. Something to do with the function, either of My War for Me and the poem structure, or I don't know. Some of the stuff I was exploring was interesting. Was it in this one? So, in Tea with Olga, I started looking at, and this one was fun. So in Tea with Olga, TWO is 2. And when you use the keyword location with this poem Banco setup, the word you come up with is 2 waters. So 2 and 2 waters. And I just thought, you know, is it something? Is it something? It's interesting that it's October 10th. And, you know, obviously numerically, October is the 10th month. And, you know, October 10th is kind of like, and 10 equals X, you know. So you have like an XX. So you have 2 X's coming from this. And I'm like, what is it telling me? So anyway, when I played around with using this A through X code, along with the T's, well, at least the colors. You have red tea, black tea, Oreos, right? And then you have white bone fragments and green tea. And when you use that code to line up what lines up with, so what lines up with R, red T, R, what lines up with R, and the G lines up with the R, and what lines up with B, black T, well, the W does. And what you find is there's a mirroring of each other. So R lines up with G, B lines up with W, and then you have white bone fragments and green T. Well, W lines up with B and G lines up with R. So they mirror each other. And to me, I'm like, is it telling me something about what I'm supposed to do with these odd lists or these odd capital letters? Something to do with that A through X code. Some sort of usage for it. There's some other random things. Let's see here. As far as confirmers are concerned, there obviously seem to be some confirmers throughout. In My War for Me, we have the first paragraph that has umbilical, the word umbilical in it, suggesting that's the year Forrest was born, 1930, and Forrest was 0 years old. And then we have the 3 paragraphs that have 2 numbers in them that mimic Forrest Fenn's age if you do it that way, 0 through 79 or 80. So, there's in the alphas in the 2 April stories. So there did seem to be confirmers. Also, when you correct the days of the week and you gather them according to month, you'll find a curious pattern that arises. I might have to dig for it, so I'm not going to dig for it. I'll just, there it is. This is me laying out everything per month and like adding interesting stuff I see happening in these stories. For instance, the first 2 April stories really seem to be key to get you started in figuring out what the heck cold, warm, and hot are telling you to do. There are 6 colds altogether, 3 colds in each April story, and I thought that might have something to do with, the 6-pack of cold beers that Forrest has talked about in different, stories. The Dizzy Dean story, going in circles, and he had a 6-pack, a cold 6-pack for Dizzy Dean. And Forrest had something else to drink, right? So I think that tells me something as well. But anyway, so I started putting these together like this, and I also started, you see these little yellow postmarks, is I was writing the direction you had to go to correct the days of the week. So let's say the day of the week was Monday, but it was incorrect and you were supposed to do a Wednesday. Well, to get from Monday to Wednesday, you go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you take 2 steps to the right. Well, when you line things up this way, a curious thing occurs. And if you see at the top, we've got, to correct the days of the week, you go 2 left and 2 right. Down here, to correct the days of the week, you go 1 left, 1 right, 1 left. And this one's a fun one. You go, and obviously I didn't have them in any particular order, but that's how it showed up. 5 right, 2 right, 3 right, 4 right. Right, so we've got stuff that kind of tells you, I think this is where you need to be going. So you correct the days of the week, you assemble them per month, and you get some stuff that kind of lines up like that. Yeah, I mean, like I say, analyze the heck out of this stuff. It was the only way to find if the anomalies that I was getting were statistically significant, right? You can find all kinds of links to all kinds of things, but is it worth your time to explore? How much time do you have to explore this curiosity that you found? Explore it enough to the point that you can figure out how likely it is to be something Forrest put there for you to analyze, to figure out. So, that's what I was doing. I was analyzing the heck out of this stuff so that when I started analyzing cold, I could say, hey, that number matches this number, or that number is doing this, and that seems to go with this. And yeah, so that's as far as I got. Oh my God, that was painful. Are you guys in pain? I'm in pain. I'm in a lot of pain. I was so envious of all the boots on the ground searchers, because I was spending my spare time doing this because I thought there was a chance. I thought, I can do this. I can do this. Anyway, there's more, obviously, to a lot of what I've done, but those are the basics. The poem and the banco. The poem gives you the structure. The banco is the information you need to get the correct word count. The My War for Me story, the second drop cap, is lined up with Forrest Fenn's age and most likely is in use with the word hot. And this suggesting that as you go through the next clues, you will need an additional set of keywords. I don't know if you just need one, 2 or 3 keywords, but that is what is being suggested from what I found. I never figured out, though, what I'm supposed to do with it, right? What I'm supposed to do with this, number that I get after I use this. So I have a keyword. It gives me these different word counts. One of them, I can match up with the poem banco structure and then get a different word. One of them maybe does hot. So there's only, of cold, warm, and hot, there's only 2 hots in My War for Me. There is no warm or cold. And so my guess potentially is that you locate that keyword in My War for Me, and whatever paragraph it's in gives you Forrest Fenn's age, that equivalent paragraph, that age. But again, then what do you do with it, right? I was just learning. I was just learning from the word cold what to do with that information. And it seemed like hot was associated with Forrest and the reverse count. It was like a hall of mirrors, the number of, how reverse are we going here, right? Reverse count there, and then reverse count of the poem, and then reverse count in, that's, yeah, I was exploring those things. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. Oh, I should show you guys this. At function in the junction. Actually, I shouldn't show you because it's illegal. It's illegal. I did an illegal thing. At function in the junction, we went to Ojo Caliente up in Yellowstone. And I took some grasses and a bleached out piece of wood. Just something to, remember things by. I'm tactile that way. I'm kind of like Forrest as far as being a collector of things. Yeah, I think that's most of it. I hope it wasn't too confusing. Sorry. But, you know, it's over. Nothing we can do will change the fact that it's over. And I think that's why for so many of us, you know, it was like a death. A sudden death too, you know. Maybe it was the big surprise Forrest was talking about, you know, maybe it was, he already knew it was going to be found, but there's something to do with that June 5th date that confirmed it or solidified it or something, you know. But yeah, I think for a lot of us, it's the death of our potential, you know. It's the death of what we could have achieved. We're all, you know, we're all hanging out here in Mediocreville, and this chase gave us the potential to be up here. This chase gave us the, you know, all of us had this great potential. And when the chest was found, that was just wiped out in an instant. All of a sudden it was gone. And none of us had that potential anymore. You know, and none of us will have anything like this. Something created for the average person to succeed. And so, you know, yeah, I think it's very much like a death. And this is my funeral. All of this worthless information. Oh God, it hurts. And most of you who know me didn't know I was this deep into it. You know, I was an armchair searcher, and that was a rare breed in this thing. Let's see here. So I've covered everything, I think. And I think I'm ready to say goodbye to this, to what could have been, right? I'm not someone comfortable with grieving in public, but I know that this is important to share for all the rest of you going through the same stuff. So whenever this is released, I hope it helps. So much time. So much time. So much thought. Okay. Hi, everybody. One last toast in this funeral. Because we know, you know, we're still a community. And we're lost, and we will find our way. To new beginnings. Right? To new beginnings. Love you guys. To new beginnings. So what's next for me? You know, I don't know. I don't know, and that's kind of scary. Nothing can live up to what the potential was for this. So why don't we all, you know, take ourselves down a notch? You know, when life beats you up, kind of tosses you around a little bit, throws you a curveball. Just for a little bit, why don't we all dream a little smaller, right? A lesson in humility and the little things. Take your ego down. You didn't solve it, and you're in the boat with all the rest of us. You're the opposite of alone, right? Okay, I think I know what I'm gonna do today. Yeah, I think I know what I'm gonna do today. All right, you guys. I'll see you out there.